Hello everyone, my name's International Master Robert Jamieson from Kids Unlimited in Australia, and for our lesson today I thought we might start with a couple of little stories. They say a good chess lesson always starts with a story. So in Australia we have an Australian Junior Championship each year to determine the best junior in the country. I think it's been going since about 1947. Now, who is the strongest player to have ever finished first in an Australian Junior Championship tournament? Could it be our current strongest player, Anton Smirnov? Could it be Ian Rogers, who was our best player for about 25 years? Well, strangely, it is neither of those two. It is a young boy from New Zealand named Murray Chandler, who came across in 1975 and finished first in the tournament. We couldn't give him the title because he's from New Zealand, not Australia. But he went on to become quite a strong grandmaster, moved to England, ended up maybe number 50 or so in the world. So the strongest player to ever finish first in Australian Junior Championship tournament is Murray Chandler from New Zealand. The reason I'm mentioning him is because his other claim to fame is he wrote a best-selling chess book called How to Beat Your Dad at Chess. I imagine quite a few of my students play their father at chess, and hopefully some of them manage to beat him. Now, I'm mentioning that because today's lesson is between a father and a son. And the son, I won't tell you who they are, I'll tell you at the end. The son reckons he's a pretty strong player. He's about 15 years old, perhaps a little bit full of himself. So he challenges his dad to a game and he says, "Dad, I will give you a rook start." So if you look at the position, the son's playing white. There is no rook on A1. He's giving his dad a rook start. Now, his dad, I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's not a bad player either. Probably say he was at least a good club player standard. And the other interesting thing about him is he died in a most unusual way. He was an important man because he was a judge at the Supreme Court of Louisiana. But his strange death, let me give you some choices. Was he killed by a sausage? Was he killed by his wallpaper? Was he killed by a Panama hat? Or perhaps he was killed by a tortoise? What do you think? Sausage, wallpaper, hat or tortoise? Hope you've decided. All right, well, let's go through them. Who was killed by a sausage? Alexander Alekhine, the World Chess Championship, dined alone in his flat in Portugal in 1946 and choked to death on a sausage. Wasn't him. Who was killed by his wallpaper? Napoleon Bonaparte, in exile on the little island of St. Helena. His room had green wallpaper, and the green colour came from arsenic, which eventually leached out, and he died of arsenic poisoning. So you could say he was killed by his wallpaper. Wasn't Napoleon, even though he was a chess player. Tortoise. Well, about 450 BC, something like that. This ancient Greek playwright, an old dude, was out in his garden. So imagine him, he's wearing his long white robes, got a big white beard, he's bald as a bat, pottering around in his garden. Meanwhile, an eagle had captured a tortoise and was flying overhead, and the eagle would like to eat the tortoise, but there's a small problem. How does he get through the tortoise's shell? So the eagle's pretty smart. He's worked out this plan. He drops the tortoise onto a rock, smashes the shell, and eats it. So the eagle sees this nice rock, drops the tortoise, but alas, it was not a rock. It was the bald head of our Greek philosopher, and he died from being hit by a tortoise. It wasn't recorded whether the tortoise survived the incident or not. So in today's game, the father is the remaining strange death. He was killed by a Panama hat. Panama hat is a broad-brimmed straw hat to keep the sun off you. And he was having an animated discussion with a friend in Louisiana, and the friend's hat got a bit too close and grazed him across the top of the eye, became infected, and a few days later he died. So you could say he was killed by a Panama hat. All right, so enough about our two players. Let's get into the game. So, like all chess games, we need to understand the big picture. So the big picture is that white is a rook down. So what do you reckon would be a good strategy for white if he's so much behind on material? I can think of two strategies. One would be to play really safe, to try and have a block position and hide behind your pawns and not swap off stuff, because the longer the game goes on, the more chance your opponent, who's a less strong player, would make a mistake. That's strategy one. Strategy two would be to go all out for a vicious attack and try and beat your opponent before he could mobilize his larger army. So in today's game, white's going to try strategy two. Now, what about the dad? What should his strategy be? He's up in material. So I'm sure a lot of your coaches tell you when you're up in material, swap pieces. So he should be out there swapping as many pieces as he can. Because when you look at it, say he has 7 pieces to 8, that's not much of a difference. But if you go swap, 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 and he has 1 to 2, the other army is twice as big. So every swap, you're making your advantage relatively larger. All right, so you guys can perhaps help the son and I'll help the father. Let's get started. So what would be, if we want to play an attacking game, what would our first move be? I think most of you would probably play E4. All right, the dad replies E5. Next move's pretty obvious. Knight F3, develops a piece, attacks the E pawn, and black defends, developing his knight to C6, so he's got a piece out as well. All right, next move, bishop C4. Why do we choose this move? It's because the bishop is attacking the weak point on F7. Black could put his bishop out to C5, but he puts his knight out. Now, this gives white an opportunity to play an attacking line. I'm sure most of you have heard of it because it's got the most stupid name in the history of chess. It's called the fried liver attack. So white plays knight G5. So now he has a double attack on the weak point F7. How is black going to defend it? He can't defend, but he can block. So the best move is D5. White naturally takes. Now, here you have to be very careful. If you know this opening and you're a strong player, you would almost certainly play knight A5, attacking the bishop. So the bishop would probably go check, then you attack the bishop again, maybe would swap, and now white could either run back to D3 with the bishop, or you could perhaps play queen F3 because the pawn is pinned. And it's an interesting game. Black's a pawn down, but he has more play and more space. So that's what should happen. But if you don't know your theory, you might fall for white's trap, as the dad did in this game, and play knight takes D5. Now, what is the trap? If you're a fried liver player, you know the trap. It's knight takes F7, because the queen was attacking our knight. Now we've forked the queen and the rook, so black's move is pretty much forced. King takes knight, and our follow-up move, queen F3. So now we have a double attack on this knight here. So the only way to save that knight is to move our king further into the middle. So white's attacking the knight twice, black's defending it twice. Black is a piece up, not to mention the extra rook. All right, when you have a piece pinned, what do? You attack it some more because it can't run away. So white clearly plays knight C3. So he's attacking it 3 times, defended twice. Now black can defend it again, and normally you would either play knight E7 or knight B4. Probably most players would play knight B4 because in a proper game where you're not a rook up, you'd also be threatening knight takes C2, winning the rook in the corner. But in this game, the dad didn't play defensively. He went for a counterattack on white's queen and the pawn on C2. Probably not the best move because white can now gain a piece back. So bishop takes knight, check. King goes here. All right, so now white's only the exchange ahead, plus a pawn, but his queen's attacked, his pawn's attacked. What do you reckon would be a good move for white here? A lot of my students don't get it. So have a look around, think about what you're trying to do. And what you're trying to do clearly is checkmate the black king because it's in the middle of the board. So you don't sort of play a retreating move to defend your pawn. What you play is queen f7. Now this has a sneaky threat. Can anyone tell me what white's threatening now? It's a pretty powerful threat because black doesn't notice knight e4 check is mate in 1. So black has to get out of the threat. Plays bishop e6, attacking the queen and the bishop. So we pretty much have to take. Knight takes. All right, so I imagine black's quite happy here because he's swapped off another piece and white's only got 2 men developed, a queen and a knight. We're probably not going to mate with a queen and a knight. What can white do? Black's king is still roaming around the middle. So the next move is fairly obvious. Knight e4 check. Now the king's only got 2 moves here and here. If it goes to c6, we can clearly take the knight, get our piece back, and the king's in trouble. So he goes to d5. Now he's attacking our knight. Dear oh dear. White comes up with a very clever move here. So have a little think. What would you play if you were white? Do we just defend that knight? Do we move it? Maybe we could go knight c3 check and have a draw by perpetual check if black goes back to d6. But the son wants to beat the dad, so he comes up with a clever move. c4 check. Now clearly, if the king takes the pawn, we can gobble the knight. So the king takes the knight. Now we've only got 1 piece attacking a queen. And we're down heaps of material. So I imagine you'll take the knight back. All right, so we're back to being a whole rook down, but look at this king. Looks very dangerous roaming around our half of the board. Black moves the queen to d4. All right, what can we do to try and checkmate that king? A couple of possible moves, or we could just castle or something like that. But white plays a clever move, queen g4 check, driving the king further into white's camp. Only move is d3. Now the king's threatening to take on c4 and run back to his own half of the board. So we hit him with another move, queen e2 check. Nearly checkmate, he's only got 1 move, king c2. Now he's attacking our bishop. What to do, what to do? White comes up with another good move, d3 check, attacking the king again. Now the king should probably play king b1, in which case I think we castle, threatening to move the bishop and win the queen with discovered attack. Probably king takes pawn, but now white would play queen here, and black's going to be hard pressed to stop pawn check and then bishop here, somewhere along here, checkmate on the back rank. So that was the best defense, but maybe at this stage of the game, the dad took pity on the son and he did a bad move. He did king takes bishop, bit greedy, and allows white a beautiful finish. I'm hoping you can all see it. It's castle's checkmate. How about that? Checkmate with castling as the checkmating move, and we've chased the black king all the way up to our half of the board. So black made a few mistakes in that game, but the son, he was clearly a pretty good player. Anyone want to guess his name? Remember I said his dad was a Supreme Court judge in Louisiana, which is a state in the south of the United States. And I'm sure you would have heard of the son's name. His name was Paul Morphy. Played a lot of brilliant games and was clearly the best chess player in the world. Anyway, that'll do for today. I hope you've enjoyed our lesson, and I'll see you next time.